I grew up in a bubble. Not in a physical sense, of course, but in the mental sense. That ever since I was a kid, I knew there were problems, I knew I had to face them, but they're not my problems. I didn't have to face them. I wasn't the one who was at fault, so why is it my responsibility? Ever since I was a kid, I realized that I had a lot of opportunities that other children didn't. I could travel the world. I had a family to go home to. When I went home, there was food waiting on the table. I could go to schools that a lot of kids couldn't even dream of. And in another sense, I had the same opportunities that a lot of my peers did, except for one. There's one opportunity that I never realized was so special. My mother and father had always told me it was important to give back. They told me that I was privileged, that I was lucky, but I don't think I ever realized how lucky I was. On Saturdays and Sundays, my mother and father brought me to orphanages, to public housings. And when I was a kid, I'm going to admit up front right now that I didn't want to go. I would rather stay home. I would rather hang out with my friends. My friends would come to school on Monday morning and tell me, oh, I did this, I did that, and I would be silent because honestly, I didn't want to do it. Luckily, that changed. My mother came to me a couple years ago and told me, you know what? We're going on a trip. And I said, well, okay. She said that we were going to visit 10 different orphanages in 7 days. And I said, okay, as any other child would do. I met some people there. They changed my life. I don't know what it was about them. Maybe it was the way they smiled at the face of adversity. Maybe it was their talent for music, but something about them stood out to me. They didn't have a home. And I said, you know what? I'm going to help them. I need to donate money. I went to my mom and said, Mom, how are you going to help them? Mom, is there any way you can help them? She said, no. I said, what do you mean? You have the money, you have the people, you have the contacts. Why are you telling me to do it? And she says, wait, but you have the passion. And so that night, I went home and I wrote a letter to over 100 people saying, next month is my birthday. Instead of gifts, please, for my 9th birthday, give me money for them. We raised $96 million. And when that happened, a lot of people came to me and they said, you should be proud of yourself. And I said, oh yes, thank you. Because I realized that as much as I was happy that I had helped them, it was a short-term thing. That was all I had done. What else am I supposed to do? Coincidentally, a couple weeks after my birthday, we started a new unit at school, social justice. And during that unit, we touched briefly on something called human trafficking. I don't know what it was about it, but I went home and I said that I wanted to know more about it. I sat down, opened up my mom's computer. My mom sat next to me, and I researched human trafficking. And I realized that it wasn't just human trafficking. It was child trafficking. And it wasn't just child trafficking, it was child labor. It was child prostitution. It was children my age being sold for sex. And I looked at it and I thought, okay, but it doesn't happen in Indonesia. I found out that 150,000 children are trafficked every year in Indonesia. I found out that 43.5% of these children are younger than 14 years old. Until a couple months ago, that was my age. Now it's younger than me. And I know, for a lot of us, what is this but a couple numbers? Percentages, statistics. Who has time to think about that? So I'm going to do you a favor. At least I hope it is. I'm going to tell you a story. I've had a friend, I still do, I'd like to think. I first met her 3 years ago. She was 18 years old, and her name, let's call her Mawar. When I met her, I don't think I realized what story I was about to listen to. She told me that, you know what, she had gotten married at the age of 10. She had given birth at the age of 11, and then she was trafficked at the age of 12. I said, well, how did that happen? She said she and her friends had been sitting and eating in a restaurant. They had been talking about how they were going to end up supporting their children, their husbands. A woman came over to them and said, oh, I overheard what you were saying. You need jobs? I have the perfect job for you. Her friends immediately agreed. They had no other choice. Mawar herself thought, wait, are you sure? She was hesitant, but what other option did she have? So she agrees. She agrees, and they get on a truck that night, and they travel for hours and hours and hours and hours, and they're picking up other girls along the way, and nobody knows where they're going, but they have no other choice because they don't know where they are. They can't just stop the truck and get out. They finally reach their destination. Mawar and her friends were trafficked into child labor. Mawar told me she transitioned from each house every month. She said there was one man who would hit her with a specific table. There was one man who threatened to rape her. She was split up from her friends. She was lost and alone. And as I listened, I didn't understand how this could happen so close to me. I asked, well, what happened to your friends? I know you escaped, but where are your friends? And she said, we don't know. The first friend, we never found. The second friend we found, but not in the state we wished. She was pregnant and dead in the back of a dump truck. And that was one of the first stories I ever heard, the first survivor story that moved me so much. That's how Rumah Faye came to be. An NGO that helps children who are trafficked into prostitution, sex trafficking. And a lot of people ask, why is that so important? Why did I, as a young child, feel the need for an actual NGO? It's that Rumah Faye is one of the only fully Indonesian non-governmental organizations that help children who are trafficked into sex trafficking in all three programs: prevention, rescue, and rehabilitation. We're Indonesian. And a lot of people ask, why prevention? Why not just rescue and rehabilitation like a lot of other NGOs? Because you see, this is a cycle that is already happening in Indonesia. It's a cycle that keeps going, and most of us don't even realize it. It's not about getting girls out of this cycle, it's about stopping this cycle completely. It's about giving opportunities to people who don't have any. Not just educational opportunities, but also vocational opportunities. You see, under prevention, it's teaching people their rights. It's telling people that you have rights and you have to stand up for them. How many people here have children? Yes? How many people here know the 4 basic rights that your children have under Indonesian law? And can cite it? See, like one person. You see, under Indonesian law, we have 4 basic rights. Not only that, that's not our only right, it's that Indonesia is one of the countries that signed the United Nations Rights of the Child, which has over 50 rights for children that can be applied, and this is the first right, that can be applied for anybody under 18 years old. And this isn't even all of it. How many rights do you think are violated right now in our country? People come and they tell me that well, is it really happening? Where does it happen? Are you sure it happens here? Because I've never seen it before. I told you earlier that I was in disbelief of human trafficking because it had never touched me personally. It was never in my community. At least that's what I thought. As I grew up, as I worked in Rumah Faye, I realized that actually it kind of did. You see, I told you earlier that Saturdays and Sundays were spent in orphanages and public housings where I would switch emails with the kids. I wouldn't talk to them regularly, but sometimes I would shoot off an email and say, "Hi, I'm coming this weekend. I'll meet you there?" And they'd say yes. But there were days when I'd come and they wouldn't be there. And I would ask, "Do you know where she is? Do you know where they went? Can I contact her some way?" And they didn't look me in the eye. They would say, "Oh, I don't know." And I dropped it. And now I know that a lot of these girls, they left to find jobs, and most of them had ended up selling their bodies. And that is the one regret I've had for years, that I dropped a lot of these conversations. Human trafficking happens in our communities. Earlier, I told you about my friend Mawar. And I know, for most of you, when I told you about Mawar, you automatically thought of a place far, far away from here. Yes, it happens, but not here. That happens all the time. And do you know where Mawar happened? It happened within walking distance of this place. It happens in your communities. Human trafficking, child prostitution happens in Indonesia. And it's time we understand it's a problem. It's time we understand that sex should not be a taboo. Sex education is important, not only for children who have the means to education, but also for children who have never dreamt of it. We have to understand that kids have rights that must be respected. Thank you.